And live, we are building, shipping, and sharing from the Toronto Machine Learning Summit, everybody. We just finished with a workshop on RAG, agents, and MCP.
Yeah.
Fully hyped out, but also we told people what really mattered, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was a whirlwind session, of course, but I think we focused a lot on the fundamentals. What we really, want people to leave with is a sense that this technology is important.
That's right.
But there's so much more that you can dive into. There's so much more to learn. This is trailheads. You can't, regardless of what you might see on social media, Greg, you can't learn this stuff in an hour. You can't learn it in 3 hours. It takes time and practice.
That's right. As all of our YouTube regular listeners know, this stuff just takes a lot of effort, shots on goal. So it was a whirlwind, but it was also a blast. This was kind of wrapping up the entire week for us. It was a bunch of talks on Monday, a bunch of talks on Tuesday, and then today was workshop day.
That's right.
And we spent all morning workshopping it up. So let's dive in a little bit, Wiz, to some of those talks that we saw on Monday and give the audience a little bit of a feel for what they might have missed if they didn't get to attend live. So we picked out, everybody, a couple of really important things that spoke to us. Not every talk was selected, but we looked at a couple and we wanted to think, okay, what are we really learning from this conference? What can we share with our audience? What might be useful to all of you? So first one, Wiz, this is your pick. This was who owns AI ethics? Building accountable teams in the age of ML by Rose, Janelle, or Janelli. What did you take away from this talk in particular? I didn't see this one.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to MC for a number of talks, including Rose Janelle's talk on AI ethics. And I think the thing I took away is that, ethics is an important sticking point, and it's got to really be a team effort. We're kind of out of like you just foist it onto your legal team and pray.
That's right.
Everyone's got to be thinking about ethics all the time. As we know, regulations are ever increasing in this space, and so really nailing the culture around ethics is going to become important to make sure that you're not producing models or applications that wind up getting you into trouble, or wind up, perhaps more importantly, but less business critically, introducing things that are unwanted. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think a lot about, culture in general as the CEO, and building it is often like the daily actions of people, like potentially engineers in the org. So, like, on a practical level, if we're building apps today and I'm an AI engineer, like, what exactly should some of the ethical questions I ask as I start to build an application even be? I mean, like, this is kind of unknown territory for much of the industry right now. What are some of your thoughts based on, whatever was percolating while you were watching Rose?
Yeah, I mean, some things she said that stood out are this idea that, again, like it starts with the IC level for a lot of organizations, right? Individual contributors. And it starts with noticing that you're building an app and maybe the source data you're using or the personas you're testing against, they don't represent your user base, and they're not aligned with real humans in the world. And I think that's being able to tie yourself back to reality and doing persona testing, with
persona testing.
Yeah.
What did you recently? You were talking about 6 million personas or
600,000.
600,000.
Yeah. That's right. 600,000 personas in the Neotron personas data set, which uses the U.S. Census to build a representative group of personas. But beyond that, knowing who your users are, where they live, what they're into, understanding that, we're building these apps for humans, and humans look and feel many different ways.
That's right. And it almost like, and the last point on this one, I think, is it almost reminds me of kind of just unit testing your software in general. Think about the failure cases. Think about how it might make people upset. Think about how it might break down. Think about, like, maybe even find some ethical principles your company has today and even feed that in as maybe kind of an AI constitution.
A constitution sounds pretty cool.
You know what I mean? maybe in your MCP server, in your cursor. Like, I think there are some really practical things, and I'm excited to see how the space evolves. Any final thoughts on this?
No, I think you wrapped it up great.
Okay, next one. This is one that I saw, Wiz, and this was quite researchy, so you get a lot of the kind of high level, the research, and the application stuff. This was called Rethinking Unsupervised Learning by Leland and McKinnus. And kind of the big idea was that the algorithms that we use to do unsupervised learning today, things like PCA, things like even just density histograms from like the 1800s, like the big idea was that when we were developing these algos, it wasn't for data sets that were extremely large, like that had many, potentially hundreds or thousands of features. It was rather for data sets that had maybe a couple. That's sort of
the scaling of the data for like these unsupervised algorithms didn't need to be considered yet, maybe.
Yeah, like because it wasn't computable with the computers of the time. And so the sort of interesting takeaway was that if you go from 3 dimensions, which of course you can visualize, to now 100 dimensions, oftentimes what happens is when you force a visualization on that and you sort of take a geometric view of, like, let's say clustering is the classic, right? What happens is that the clusters themselves in very, very high dimensional space, they end up sort of being stretched out. And so the nearest neighbor to any given data point, KNN, similarity search, the same type of algorithm used in like a RAG pipeline to find the stuff that's similar to your query, that is actually going to calculate a nearest neighbor that is kind of maybe really far away from where you intuited it might have been in a smaller dimensional space. And so what Leland is working on, it was like, one of these research labs was a way to take very, very high dimensional data and do clustering on it, and then to basically have some let's call them post-training algorithms or something that sort of give us the ability to use the same intuition that we used on the smaller data sets, but for the very, very large high dimensional data sets. Does this square with you as being useful or necessary? What follow-ups would you sort of suggest?
I mean, the thing is like, I know you called it RAG specifically, like the way we think about RAG, but when we think about RAG, we're actually thinking about like attention, right? The same kinds of principles are true. That embedded representation is very important, even in the attention mechanism. And so, imagining that there's some smudging going on or some slight incongruence between, how we intuitively understand words and how the machine understands or interprets word meaning.
Right.
I think, anything that helps make that closer to how us, the human, understands words must have a positive impact on the interpretation by our systems. If intuitively I know like cat, bat, and rat are in the same space, but the LLM has them stretched out.
That's right.
There's something's not aligned there.
That's right. Yeah, and it's or I guess intuitively in the RAG context, if sort of question A and question B come from the same problem of customer and persona C, right? Then like maybe they should be close because they both matter to the customer. And so you're in this sort of, it's not classical ML anymore, it's higher dimensional. Maybe we need algorithms that allow us to use the same intuition, and maybe we need people like Leland working on it. So this
definitely we do.
This makes me, this reminds me of another talk that we saw this was actually on Tuesday, that we saw by Louis Serrano, a famous popularizer of machine learning stuff here on YouTube. And what he talked about, the talk was entitled Celestial Mechanics. Such a good talk name, of the attention mechanism. And the connection here is that one of the ways that he was teaching us about how to think about attention and embeddings was that the embedding space representation isn't necessarily a question of do I have the right or wrong embedding space. It's which one can give me the most intuition about my problem, and which one makes me feel like this one is probably the right one to select. Do you have any comments on how the two connect before we dig into a little bit more about Lewis's talk?
Yeah, I mean, you would expect that some of the warping and wibbling that needs to be done in order to really shape the embedding space into a useful form, perhaps would be taken care of if we had a better understanding or better ability to cluster or better ability to express distance in those clusters, right? In this very high dimensional space that we live in all the time.
That's right.
I think that that's just got to be helpful. I'm sure the threads are linked in a way that people who are in-depth researching likely have better language
so
for.
Brass tacks though, coming back down to earth for the AI engineers out there.
Getting out of the celestial to the terrestrial.
Yeah, let's come back down to the terrestrial level here. Yeah. I mean, when we're building apps, how do you think about intuition for embedding model choices? How do you think about that? Oh, 784 over here. Oh, 1056 over here. Or is there sort of this is the data it was trained on intuition that you use, or something else perhaps?
That's exactly it. And I think this is why things like embedding fine tuning is so popular. And one of the things that, we and others would recommend you to look for first when you're looking to improve that dense vector representation, because, we know that aligning it to your data is going to intuitively make it fetch things that you would expect it to fetch, right? Versus things that perhaps would be a little bit surprised. We want to minimize the surprise we feel when we retrieve that item. Yeah, we don't want to make re-ranking too easy for the re-ranker, right? As we should always be using one in our RAG pipeline anyways. So I guess I was struck by Lewis's talk that even still 8 years later, it's tough to explain attention. Those of you that watch our channel, you definitely know, we've done our best to explain attention to date in many different ways. And it's just really hard to get down to query keys and values territory and do this right. Even in 2025, it's not clear what the best way to understand this is. And, I think a couple takeaways were uncommon words have a lot of pull. That is if it's sort of, anomalous or hard to be similar to, it actually should be attended to more. And, the classic example that he used in his presentation was Apple, right? What does it mean? Well, I don't know. Are you talking about the fruit or the tech company? And so we got another classic example of the dual use words. A banger.
Oh, absolute banger.
A banger.
But it's just still hard to do this.
The thing is even when we talk about pull and we talk about keys and queries, there's always this last hop unintuitive step where, a moment that stuck out to me, Luis asks a question of the crowd.
Ooh.
In the crowd, you can feel them wanting to say the intuitively correct answer.
Yes.
But knowing that the intuitively correct answer wouldn't be the absolutely correct answer. And this is from someone who spent a lot of time and a lot of reps trying to explain this and there's still that last hop. Intuition just does not, we don't have the words strung together that makes it go of course.
Yeah. We still need to get there.
Yeah, we got the light bulb, eureka.
Yeah. People like Lewis and Jay Alamar and like us are trying to do this all the time. And, it just is a really hard problem when you're deep down in the weeds of the transformer. But I think building intuition is maybe the common thread across Leland and across, Lewis's talks. Yeah. How do we actually do this in a world that's, amazingly complex of massive data? Okay, so, and I think the takeaway here was maybe embeddings will kind of work whatever you choose, even if your intuitions don't align with them. So,
that's right.
At the end of the day, just throw it in the computer, throw it in the app. Let's see if it works. Intuition be damned.
The intuition makes you and I feel better. And the transformer does not care.
That's right. The code doesn't care about the concepts. Yeah. Okay, so the next one, this was from Neo4j and from Fani Dathar, talking about graph rag. So this was graph rag, enhancing AI with knowledge graphs, retrieval, and autonomous agents. And of course, right at the end, a little MCP too. What I took away from this is thinking about the idea of unstructured versus structured versus semi-structured versus now bringing multimodal type of data in. And it kind of really spoke to me as like, how exactly are we defining structured and unstructured anymore? It used to make a lot of sense to sort of say structured query language, tabular data. We all knew what we were talking about. But the more that we've gotten into like self-supervised and semi-supervised learning, where it's like, is it supervised or unsupervised? Am I using structured or unstructured data? Am I generating structured data from unstructured data, right? Or like the question we got today in the workshop was like, can I use the LM to generate metadata about my data and give more structure to the data? It just really, I was struck by how the graph rag problem, although it's super hype and it's super potentially useful for hyper complex use cases, like AWS has some great use cases. But it kind of feels like unless you've solved a lot of simpler problems first, like really well, don't be touching graph rag. Just get your data in the right format and build a rag application. That's what I took away. I don't know what comments you have on this.
Yeah, I mean, like the structured versus unstructured is all constructed by us, right? The data doesn't care. It's just how what algorithm we feed it into. I think that's a really good take, though, to end on with that talk, which is that, this is stuff that you're worried about if you have very specific looking problems, or if you've already really hammered out the much quote unquote easier task, though it's still not easy, of the rest of your retrieval pipeline. I think it's an excellent tool LLMs are going to be able to help with. And, I believe Neo4j is going to continue to iterate and make more accessible. But again, unless your problem looks like a graph, or unless you've already kind of nailed the rest of the pipeline, it's just, it's something I'd reach to as an enhancement after.
Well, you're reminding me of the example he used where it was like, we use a lot of movies at Neo4j. And the thing about a movie is, if it looks like a graph and quacks like a graph, and really, you could answer the question by literally just moving through the graph and collecting each piece, connecting it with each edge, collecting each node information, do you really even need a generator? And is it kind of just graph structured query language, at that point?
Well, that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
If you could just concatenate the graph traversal together and then populate the answer that way, I mean, you don't necessarily, that is the generation.
It's fast and very computer efficient.
Exactly.
That is the generation.
That's right. You're building up from the tokens in the network.
That's right.
And I think, at the end of the day, a lot of language can be expressed this way. And so, people are going crazy on graph research in the space, and they'll continue to do so because it's there are so many things, especially about us humans, that look an awful lot like a graph. Yeah.
And maybe that's one of the other ways we can start to think about solving the very high dimensional data problem is structuring it with the right constructs.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Very, very cool. So structure matters, but it's kind of a facade. That's what I'm taking away. Okay.
I think that's a good takeaway.
Yeah. Okay. Next up, Llama Neotron. Okay. Open reasoning models by Soumya Singhal. This is over at NVIDIA. Reasoning models. I love reasoning models. They've kind of become my standard. O3 has kind of become my standard user, like my standard use case model on a daily basis. I'm not really needing the answer right now all of the time. What's different about the Llama Neotron model versus some of the other reasoning models out there today? And, like DeepSeek R1 is another open reasoning model. This thing came out a little bit recently. It's pretty new. What should we know about it? What should our audience know?
Yeah, I mean, it's very open. So beyond just the weights, beyond just even the data, the training pipeline is open. The branch used to train the model, right, with the technology is open.
Yeah.
The framework to do the at scale RL is open. I mean, the whole thing is open.
So it's like the DeepSeek week, like inspired more openness. Yeah.
But even more open, and then crucially and critically, enterprise viable, enterprise compliant, right, for people who have a sensitivity about some of the other open models that leads them to not being able to leverage them. I think, and additionally, the technical report covers everything.
That's right.
Every step.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So when we think about, like, we told everybody what our best picks for open source models for production RAG applications are: embedding models, chat models. I guess when I think about the best open source reasoning model, there's not like a clear answer to me. Is this sort of what you expect from Llama Neotron? Do you expect Meta to come out with 3.3R or 4 or 5R? Is there a gold standard today? And if so, is it Llama Neotron?
There's a gaggle of models at the top right now for open models, and I think it depends a lot on use case. It depends a lot on what tolerance you have for certain sensitivities that may or may not exist in your organization. But at the end of the day, there's a cluster near the top. I mean, if you look at something like the artificial analysis leaderboard, you're going to see like the most recent update to DeepSeek R1's model is currently capping out. We had one just yesterday that came out that's crushing. And you can expect that all of these labs.
Reasoning is this really competitive space right now.
It's so competitive. We don't even fully understand how to evaluate strength of these models. They're getting so strong, and you can expect that all of the shops that have so far put effort into this space are likely to continue, and we're likely to continue to see the gap closing. And if you do look at that artificial analysis leaderboard, you'll see that the gap between the closed frontier shops and the open shops is smaller than really it's ever been before.
That's pretty cool. So watch this space. Reasoning models. Okay. Last one that I saw on Monday that I liked. This was from Arise Phoenix, from John Gilhooly at Arise. And, they were trying to automate like fully. This is a monitoring and observability platform. It's one that we actually highly recommend if you're going on-prem as a drop-in replacement for Langsmith. And they were trying to fully automate feedback loops with what they called Text Pro, which was effectively automatic sort of meta LLM as a judging prompt optimization to say, let's optimize the prompt for each tool description. Let's optimize the prompt used for the tool call or the set of tool calls for this particular query. And it was sort of trying to build a fully automated feedback loop to what ultimately it felt like was to sort of do a slight micro optimization to the prompt and the output in the end. This was kind of interesting to see that, again, when we drill all the way down, what we see is change the prompt. We're just still changing the prompts. And I think, I wonder how much of the automation of observability platforms that we really don't properly have yet. We've got monitoring, we've got logging, but like the true observability where it's like hands off, it automatically fixes everything and collects all the errors and optimizes things for you. I think that's going to come down to a lot of prompting, it seems, and it's not really clear to anybody what else we need to do.
Well, and I mean, there's this little funny thing that happens where we get so used to these complex LLM systems, we get so used to APIs and, the function calling API. We get so used to Cursor.
Right.
We get so used to Claude and Devin and codecs. And then like, I think sometimes we forget that the LLM accepts text and it returns text.
There we go.
So it's always going to be prompting at some level. There's always going to be that this LLM has tokens that fill its context window.
That's right.
It does computation and it outputs tokens.
Yep.
So, you know, it's just this, we're flying so high above the ground right now. We're looking at the clouds and then we see through the clouds. We see, oh, it's just the same old ground we've always known and loved.
Yeah.
You know?
And I will tell you, like, I was hoping in this talk when I went to it to learn something really new about agent evaluation. And I just walked away with nothing really to show for it. I mean, there was like, yes, we should monitor the traces, but we're not quite sure how. I was like, yep, that's pretty much where Ragus seems to be at. That's where everybody else I see seems to be at. It's too deep in it depends land. It starts to get into your ops team needs to work with your data team and your people need to optimize your application in your way. It's so hard to solve in general for any given agentic, trace or reasoning path.
Well, think through the analog, right? Like imagine you have an employee and that employee dutifully records every action they take throughout the day. And they write down when they looked at this email and they say how they clicked this button and they say what number of centimeters to the right they moved their mouse in order to go to the next Word document. And then imagine as a manager getting that at the end of the day and then being asked, did the employee do a good job today? And the answer is it's extraordinarily difficult.
Did they do a correct job
today? Yeah. It's like, oh, well, if you moved the mouse 3 centimeters, you would have saved a nanosecond.
Oh, yeah.
And this is the kind of territory we're into where we're building such complex dynamic systems that having a general evaluation framework is a extraordinarily difficult task. And we're really stuck on these like Lego blocks to describe systems that have emerged beyond the their constituent parts.
Yeah, and the other two talks that I want to bring into this are tangentially related. The first one is towards world models and general agents. This was from Google DeepMind and Bonnie Lee, and I mean it was pretty fun talk. The slides were definitely created by somebody at Google, and she was essentially reading the paper. But the paper was great, and it was about Genie 2. And the thing that I was struck by is, we talk about these agent reasoning traces. Okay, so agentic reasoning traces. This is sort of the key theme of the next two talks. This one was generating entire simulated worlds with the Genie 2 agent, and then actually going and trying to figure out how to generate all different types of worlds and actually going prompt to video game. So it was really cool because you could put in a prompt and then you could have a first person, just the hands, like first person shooter blowing up barrels. You could put in a prompt and you could have like a Need for Speed type car video game, or you could put in a prompt and have like a sort of an adventure kind of Pokemon Zelda style kind of third person view. And the interesting thing is you can watch what the Zelda does, or you can watch what the first-person shooter does, and you could watch their sort of reasoning traces, let's say, as they decide. You tell it, hey, go up the stairs, and you see if he actually goes up the stairs, right? And that's pretty straightforward. But what was so interesting to me is like, well, the Genie 2, the generator of these worlds, is the agent. So it's not that the first-person shooter person is the agent. It's not that Zelda's the agent. It's not that the car is the agent. It's like the agent is like that disembodied that which decides, right? And so like it really expanded my view of the way we're going to train agents with. So each trace is like a data point, and the way we might train agents in the future. And I don't know, there's a connection somewhere between what John was doing at Arise and actually looking at the reasoning traces in a simple sort of tool call context versus the little guy or the car or the person sort of walking through the world. And that was the first time that it clicked for me that simulation and large language models are finally coming together in a really beautiful way. And maybe they meet at SDG and synthetic data generation to help train these models further. But the agent is not the person on the screen.
No, yeah, this is the really interesting stuff, right? Because the Genie model takes as input, these movements that you might do. It takes like how you're moving your mouse, how you're clicking your keyboard, and then based on that, it predicts the next frame, right? And so it's not doing any decision making or reasoning about how it's moving about the world. It's kind of rendering the world.
Yeah.
But we can give this autonomous construct, another agent they trained, the ability to move keys and the ability to move the mouse and interpret what's on the screen and then predict the next action. So we have this agent looking at the screen, predicting the next action, and then we have the screen receiving this input and generating the next screen, right? So we have this very tightly coupled feedback between the two systems. And I think what's so interesting is that absolutely, and if you're RL minded in our audience today, and you're hearing these things like simulation and environment and traces, and we can develop rewards for whether or not you do well, it's like suddenly we're really outlining why it is that things like RL are so impactful these days and why we're leveraging it so hard, because we're approaching that sandbox environment facilitated through the LLM.
It's like the ability to build sandboxes is moving beyond the ASWE that we talked about last week. It's moving beyond the software engineer. It's moving into these really cool virtual worlds. And and I think that the final talk from Suhas, Suhas, man, he always leaves us with some kind of gem. But he was talking about like actually training reasoning models and scaling test time compute. And I mean, I don't know what you took away from this, but one of the things that, like the main bang box quote from Suhas that I took away from this is like, do LLMs reason is the new do LLMs understand? And he's always got some bangers that he comes out with. I took away thinking about this talk and my discussions with everybody this week, and thinking about, also the context of the Genie 2 and the simulation environment. You can have many sort of agents interacting with one another, and that could be in a simulated environment. You have a bunch of characters, or you could have a bunch of SLMs talking to each other, creating a conversation thread. And fundamentally, that's the same thing as scaling test time compute and having one model continuing to do inference with all of its context in mind in its own conversation thread. So I was able to sort of finally connect for the first time, reasoning model with like mixture of agents, multi-agent systems chatting. As long as it comes back to a single conversation thread, it's almost that's still a scaling of test time compute.
That's right. We're scaling reasoning systems to be more generic about it, right?
That's
where we're saying that there is some underlying mechanism here, but at the end of the day, we have something that when we allow it to take more time, it's going to produce better, more well thought out responses.
Yeah.
And something that I always love from Suhas, and I love from any talk that's been talking about the everyone's favorite paper, right? The illusion of thinking, from the folks at Apple. Great paper, but obviously very contentious. I think it's just this idea that does it reason is a great question for the philosophers. And those.
Does it indeed?
Yeah. And what implications does that have, and how should we cope with that, et cetera, is great stuff to philosophize about. But when you're building with the model, as we saw in the rebuttal paper from Claude Opus, a reasoning model, right? A measured and reasoned through take. We see that it's simply, without defining these words extremely explicitly, it does not matter. if it looks like a reasoning system and it acts like a reasoning system, we can quibble about whether it truly and deeply is after we build useful systems on top of it.
Yeah, and so it gets back to if you had a worker or you were an employee and you recorded every single action, it's like, well, which of those actions are actually useful to optimize? Which ones are not? Most of them are not. How we come about this data and this improvement probably doesn't have the right name yet, and we're sort of slapping everything under agentic reasoning. But that's probably okay as long as we build useful things.
We could call it the turducken factor. We could call it Glorbon. It really doesn't have any impact on what it does, how it operates, and what we can build with it. And I think that the tendency is to get caught up on terminology, and there's a big space for terminology, and it helps us have shared communication, and it helps us to talk about things in a way that's clear and understandable. But at the end of the day, when you're building with a tool, you're never thinking about what it's called. You're seeing what it can do. You're seeing the results of the action that it's taking, and that's what you're optimizing for.
Oh yeah. So many rabbit holes we could fall down here today, but we unfortunately we have to move on here. We wanted to do a special thing today for the first time, since we are live here with the team at TMLS, and we wanted to go ahead and invite each member of the team up to introduce themselves. So I think first off, I'm Dr. Greg, you're the Wiz. I think the audience knows, CEO, CTO, and we're live on YouTube every week. But next up, we want to actually invite our first member of our core team, Laura. We call her Laura, the Legend Funderburk, up.
And just for context, these people are behind the scenes.
Always. These are behind the scenes people.
You get to see us, and it's great. But these people are always behind the camera.
That's right. So
they can just walk out from behind it.
Laura, tell us a little bit about what you do at AI Makerspace, and then also share with the audience one thing that you took away from the conference this week that you thought was pretty dope.
Thank you, Greg. Yeah, so I joined the AI Makerspace team as a lead developer advocate and community lead. My focus is engaging people on our Discord channel, our YouTube channel, our LinkedIn and Twitter pages. And particularly at the conference, what has been great, it's been to talk to people who are not just learning and advancing the knowledge within the AI field, but also developing tools and technologies that we can potentially leverage in the future. One of my favorite things, of course, has been talking to people at the booths and talking to people at the conference and seeing what they're interested in. So I think my biggest takeaway is, we keep advancing along this path of using LLMs for complex applications, but also advancing the capabilities of the LLMs themselves. I think it's a crucial aspect that has been highlighted at the conference. So yeah, I've had a great time here, and I look forward to keep talking to some of the folks that I connected with at the booths.
Yeah. Okay. So Laura, you're actually on Discord all the time in the background, and you've actually also got some upcoming YouTube live events that you're going to be doing, and you're going to be leading with some new folks. Why don't you tell everybody about the one that's next week, right?
Yeah, so next week I'm going to be talking to Tuana Selig from Llama Index, and we're going to be talking about enabling agents to have memory, long-term and short-term.
Okay, one more question, Laura. So you told us what you thought was dope. What did you think was a little bit nope about the conference, and maybe could be improved for next year?
So I really liked having a chance to talk to people who are developing frameworks, and I think this time we had a little bit of variety in terms of who was on the booths. I think for next time, it'd be great to have more teams who are at the frontier of developing agentic technologies. I think that's one thing that I would recommend for next year.
More agents, a classic. Thanks, Laura. All right, we'll see you on Discord and on LinkedIn. All right,
thanks, Laura.
Yeah, and we want to just sort of introduce you to another couple members of our team. Next up, we've got Jacob. I like to call him Jake the Snake Kilpatrick here.
That's a reference for those of you who remember wrestling from a while ago.
He's actually behind the scenes of every class that we run here at AI Makerspace. Jacob, tell us a little bit about what you do and what you took away from the conference.
Yeah, and I'm definitely too young to understand that wrestling reference, but I'm the course ops lead at AI Makerspace. So basically what that means is I'm reducing friction for the instructors and peer supporters and students to have a great experience with our cohort and our bootcamp and all the behind the scenes stuff.
And something, you know, you were also at the conference all week, Jacob. What stood out to you as something that was real dope?
I mean, I'm going to be fully biased in this one, but the workshops today by AI Makerspace, by the way, were excellent. I think the big thing for me that, like the personal thing for me with that is more so than the content itself, which I've seen probably 100 times at this point, you know, a year and a half with these guys. But, you know, it's always virtual. It's always online as a remote company. And so this is really the first time I could see, you know, them in person as a instructing team, and also the attendees and students listening. And it's just a different experience for me. So it's great to do that in person this time.
And on the other hand, yeah, the give and the take, you know, that's dope. But what was nope? What do you think might make this an even better experience?
I mean, this was my first conference, so it's hard for me to, you know, prioritize, you know, what should I do? Should I talk at the booth? Should I, you know, stay at our booth and talk to people about AI Makerspace? Should I go watch all these different speakers present? And so it's hard for me, you know, focus on what to prioritize and what to do. You know, maybe another thing that was a nope for me was, you know, we're talking about highly technical topics, and a lot of these speakers only had 30 minutes to present. And so I would have loved to, you know, it maybe isn't possible with the schedule. You know, as the ops person, I can understand that. But I would have loved to see these people go much, much deeper, as I believe they can, as researchers and scientists.
Jacob, so good. Oh man, thank you so much. That's exactly the way I felt about our workshop today. Is I couldn't go deep enough, and it's like given more time, I could. Such a great point. Hope you had a great first conference.
Excellent time.
Yeah. All right,
Let's go.
let's go. And then the very last team member that we want you guys to meet is Chris Lusk. And this guy, him and I work together all the time. We've been working together for years. What do you do here exactly, Lusk? Director of Revenue, I see on the old badge here. Tell us a little bit about what you do behind the scenes.
Everything else. No, so I help team leaders upskill their team. I help them build teams that deliver faster. They generate tech credit, not generate tech credit. Yeah, and they're more efficient. They can scale better,
That's right.
and they can just deploy faster. So that's what I help these guys do.
Okay.
Same questions though, Lusk, right? So you were also at the conference, and you're not the most technical dude, okay? You top K, you got it. But you know, as someone who fit more of the leader persona, right? You know, what was something dope that you took away from the conference?
I think the number of other leaders that you get to interact with, I think that was great. I do have to echo Jacob's sentiment on what could have been better. I mean, these talks were technical. I'd like to see more time given. But I did learn a lot from the people who are actually having to struggle with state and federal regulations, the people that have to struggle with fighting their legal team, right, just to get anything launched. So that was really interesting to hear, for sure.
And you already kind of, you know, told us a little bit, but any other notes that you think would really take this kind of from pretty good to like real good?
Well, we had a ton of people at the booth, so that was awesome. As the director of revenue, I could always want more of that. So just more people coming to the booth. Had quite a few people sign up and join. You always want more of that. So yeah, just more audience.
Of course. Yeah, excellent stuff, Lusk.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lusk. Appreciate it, dude. And Lusk is also the guy that you always hear from if you sign up for our boot camps, and he wants to help direct your future revenue as well and make sure you succeed as a student. So that's the team, everybody. And one of the things that we wanted to do to sort of wrap up today is we wanted to kind of revisit, now that we're live in person, want to kind of revisit some of the things we predicted would happen this year. Well, kind of the whiz predicted would happen this year. This was from November 2024. And here we are in June. You know, MCP came out in November for, you know, a little bit of context here. And it's just sort of interesting to see in retrospect, some of the things that we were predicting, they kind of feel so obviously duh. Like, were those even predictions? But not all of them. Let's check them out before we wrap today. So Wiz, first one here, and you said this is the talk we ended on a little bit here. You predicted in November, you said test time compute will be the primary new scaling access for reasoning models and reasoning capabilities in LLMs. You said reasoning capabilities before LRMs were talked about in papers like The Illusion of Thinking. This sounds like, duh, was that a hot take? Bring us back to November and tell us where we're at today.
Yeah, so this is right before NeurIPS. This is kind of when, it was clear this was going to be something, and I think it is the space moves so fast. Every month feels like a year, right?
Software 3.0 was today. $100 million from OpenAI's yesterday. Like, what in the world?
Yeah, and I think this is the. I mean, of course, it's a solid prediction because people love scaling.
Yeah,
and the other scaling methods were slower. Do I think that we need to get a little bit more spicy with the predictions? Yes.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a soft one, and it came.
Yeah.
I would say. It's so extraordinarily true. It's insane. But it's kind of like watching Barry Bonds step up to the plate and being like, he might hit it out of the park.
Yeah. This was actually the entire basis of Suhas's talk.
That's right.
And he listed all the things, and the one on the bottom that was bold was scaling reasoning.
That's right.
Test time compute. Okay, the next one was fully SDG, synthetic data generated models, meaning they were trained sort of on fully synthetic data, or perhaps pre-trained on synthetic, or perhaps post-trained and aligned on fully synthetic data, would outcompete non-SDG models. Have we seen SDG be adopted and accepted by the community like this much so far in 2025?
It's hard to say like exactly so. I'm not going to say that this one's like conclusively locked in.
It doesn't feel that way.
But it's definitely extraordinarily close, if not technically completed. We do see fully synthetic data pipelines that do compete on the same level as our LLMs that we have today, which does mean that, in 4 days, they'll probably be ever so slightly better. We also have, of course, the, I would say at least, that SDG has permeated every facet of training. There is no place that you can hide from SDG in pre-training, in post-training, in alignment, in mid-training, everywhere.
Right. Yeah, and, I think the SDG that we do, it's like you were talking about earlier, where we kind of started this whole discussion today. It's like, how do we solve the ethical problem? It's like, well, here's a potential answer: more SDG and more personas, right?
Yeah,
and it's sort of like more and more applications are seeing utility from SDG all the time.
Well, this is the thing: we want to train models, and we want to train them on people. And we want to train them on the world that we live in.
Yes.
Right? But we can't, because people are real. They have identities and they're protected by law. Right? And so what else do you have that isn't synthetic data to actually create these personas?
Video games and worlds.
Right?
You got synthetic representations of these people.
That's right.
Dimensions.
We want to go to Mars.
That's right.
And we want to build a functioning civilization on Mars.
That's right.
But we've really never been to Mars. We've sent stuff to Mars. Now we can imagine a world where we can generate Mars, and we can generate how things behave there, and we can put stuff in the world of Mars to see how it does in a way that's feasible and doesn't take centuries of man hours. This is the kind of things that SDG has been unlocking. So I think that's one SDG. Again, maybe not the hottest take, but it's everywhere.
Not the hottest. Okay, we got 3 more. We got 3 minutes. We're going to bang one out real quick. A research paper generated by an AI is accepted
Yes.
at a major ML conference or workshop. Does the illusion of thinking by Claude Opus solve this? I think we saw this already this year.
Yeah, it had happened earlier in the year.
Check. We're good to go.
Yeah.
Okay. You also said complex multi-agent systems will still not be viable or able to consistently generate value, business value, by the end of 2025. I mean, we have deep research from everybody. Is that consistently generating business value? I mean, I feel like for me it kind of is, but I have no ROI that I calculate on it. I think this is still true. It feels true to me. It's not the end yet. 2025.
Exactly. I mean, this one is, again, you can quibble about the wording because it's vague.
Yeah.
What does complex mean? What does consistent mean, right? But I think the trend indicates that this is almost certainly to not pan out. That, in fact, we're going to have multi-agent systems. We do have a couple multi-agent systems from Anthropic. They recently released a blog on it, like as in a week ago. Devin is saying don't use multi-agent for code, but it's not saying don't use multi-agent. I think this one's pretty in the bag. The space accelerated well beyond the initial thoughts that I was able to put together in November. I think this one is
and like what is
not
reasoning could mean multi-agent in some sense. So I think we will have to get very, very tight on our language that we choose.
I think so.
2026. Last one. In the age of vibe coding that we live in now, which didn't really exist at the time, you said an app or website created solely by someone with no coding ability will go viral. I mean, obviously, vibe coding itself has gone hyper viral. It's sort of a meta to your prediction.
Yeah. Not ambitious. Again, not ambitious enough.
That's right. Space moves much faster than we thought. So, to sort of wrap, I mean, conferences like this only happen once a year, and historically once a year has kind of been enough to keep up with things. So overall, what are you taking away? Like, is this a conference that was sort of enough to get you up to like, yeah, okay, I'm up to speed. That's what it felt like for me. But it wasn't enough if you weren't up to speed yet to get up to speed. And I don't think any conference is.
No. Right? It's a Sisyphean task. There is no possibility for this anymore. We simply are moving too fast. Even in the language modeling space, we're just moving too fast.
That's right.
Right. So we used to have like NLP focused contenses. I mean, we still do, but we used to as well.
That's right.
Mitch Hedberg joke there. But the idea is, we need to break into smaller subdomains. And even then, they're moving so fast, thanks to AI acceleration, that it's impossible to have a comprehensive conference. But I think beginner to intermediate level conferences like TMLS are a very valuable checkpoint for people.
That's right.
Whose job isn't keeping up with the LLM edge. Yeah.
I always like coming to Toronto, hearing about the banks and their problems. So you always get a location specific thing. We'll be back live from the conference when we're in Austin in October at the MLOps World and Gen AI Summit Conference. I also like experiencing the Austin vibe and getting out, hanging with the team. And if the community or any of you guys ever want to come out and join us live, we always put the links and we always shout them out throughout the year and let you know where we're going to be. We hope to grow that. You'll be at NeurIPS too, I'm sure.
So yeah,
and and it'll be just interesting to see how useful conferences continue to be in the age of AI. So hopefully this was valuable to all the audience out there today. And we really look forward to continuing the typical programming. Next week we cover Llama Stack and Llama Guard.
That's right.
We're gonna kind of bang out both of them. Not Llama Neotron next week. We'll bring that. It's a little bit too much to bring in. But we're back on track next week, everybody. And are there any sort of final takeaways you have from the conference? I mean, any sort of final takeaways you have from hang with the community this week?
Yeah, I mean, conferences are not necessarily going to be universally important when it comes to keeping up with the space.
That's right.
In terms of the talks, in terms of the workshops.
That's right.
They're always going to lag a little bit, but what doesn't is the human beings that are converse with, the minds you can talk with, those conversations that happen in between talks, that happen with your team after a talk, or with the team presenting the material, are completely and totally invaluable. Basically, if you go to a conference today, optimize for having meaningful conversations with people who are on the edge, so you can try to hopefully understand and keep up as much as is possible with our human brains.
Possible. Yeah. And don't forget, every time you go to a conference, take something that you built and shipped and take the opportunity to share it live with everybody. I did really have a blast with everybody that I met from the community this week, and did have a blast hanging out with the team. I look forward to hanging out with more folks from the community at future conferences.
That's right.
And you know what?
And check that out.
We did do some building, shipping, and
we sure did
in the end. And we hope that you, until next time, will continue to do some building, shipping, and sharing as well. Quick shout out before we close today. We have a brand new cohort starting next Tuesday. And we have a special discount because we've been featured on the Maven courses list in the Maven Top 100, that you can actually get 20% off. We've got 29 spots left in the US, and for all European folks, we've got plenty of slots open for you guys. So reach out to our team. Any one of us would be happy to support your transformation and your journey in 2025 out to the LLM Edge. Thanks for joining us today, everybody. It's been a blast, Wiz.
It's been amazing. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell.
We'll see you on Discord. We'll see you on LinkedIn. We'll see you live in about 3 or 4 months from Austin, Texas. Cheers, everybody. Have a good one.